Hey, what's going on guys? It's Tom Mason here, back with another video, and today we're talking about this, the Nikon Z9, my new camera, the flagship from Nikon, and something I've been looking forward to for a long time. If you follow me on Instagram, if you don't, there's a link here. I've been testing this the last couple of weeks since mine landed through the door, getting out, shooting a few local subjects, and kind of just putting it through paces and getting used to how I'm going to be shooting with it. So I thought today what we do, head over, grab a coffee at one of the hair locations I'm still scouting out, and talk you through my thoughts and feelings of this new flagship camera. But just to kind of give you the headline, it's pretty damn good. Now this is one of my favourite places for a cup of coffee. This field is great for the hares, but it's also just a nice spot to sit back, relax, and see some great wildlife. But I'm going to fire up the jet boil and we'll talk about the Z9. That is really hot. Oh. Right then, so coffee's made. It's in my thermal cup because I know what I always do. I always just leave it and don't drink it whilst I'm making the video and it goes cold, so that hopefully will keep it warm as we go. Now this video is a bit of an introduction to the Z9. It's not going to be a full review, anything like that, because I've only been shooting the camera for like 2 and a bit weeks. You know, it's going to be 6 months or so before I've got a real chance to give a full review. I think anyone who reviews the camera in that first like 2 days of having it, it's just not really fair. You haven't given yourself a chance to learn the camera, understand it properly, and get out there and use it in the field. So we'll come back to that at a later date. This video is more about, you know, my first impressions of it out in the field, working with a few different subjects, how I've got things set up, and some of the kind of the basic thoughts and feelings of picking up a Z9. So I'm going to go through it in kind of like stages to talk about different things as we go, and based on kind of loosely what people have asked me in terms of on Instagram and things like that. And so hopefully it'll give you a good guide if you're thinking about picking one up, my first impressions on the camera. So right, let's get started. Firstly, why did I buy a Nikon Z9? You know, I already had a D850, I had a D4 as well, and I've had D500s, all those sorts of cameras. I've got a Z6 and everything like that as well. So why did I want and need the Z9? To me, it was just about combining 2 cameras into one and giving me features to work out in the field as a professional photographer. You know, I love to have the high resolution of the D850. I think it's fantastic. It makes for great image quality, really good printing, everything like that, options for cropping later, and just the sensor is just phenomenal for making really beautiful, detailed pictures. But one thing that is kind of lacking in the D850 when you compare it to something like the D5 is that just speed. You know, that, you know, frames per second, stuff like that. And when all that fast action's happening, you really do want that. So when Nikon came out with the Z9 and it's got both the speed and the resolution, that pretty much already had me hooked. Then on top of that, nowadays with me making videos like this and for clients and stuff, being able to have a camera in my hand that has such fantastic video quality, you know, we've got the new log profiles and we're getting raw video in it as well. It's going to be hugely beneficial to me as a professional shooter, and that's something I was really after. Add to that as well, that full body design that I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. You know, that's something I really loved from using the D5 when I was in Botswana. And, you know, as much as the D850 is a great camera, it just doesn't have that proper solid feel as the Z9 and those kind of top tier flagship cameras, and that's kind of what I wanted. And going forward, I knew that you know, the Z route would be where I was going, and as I'm producing more video and stills together, this certainly was going to be the camera for me. And to be honest, in the first couple of weeks, I'm really glad with my decision. Right, so let's move on to design, function, and build quality. Now Nikon's pretty well known for its build quality of cameras. You know, if you've used any Nikon cameras of the past, you know, D850, D5, D4, D3, any of those cameras, you know, they're built like absolute tanks. You can take them in the field, drag them around, crawl across and get to your subjects and you know they're going to be fine. It doesn't matter if you're in Antarctica or the desert, they're going to work. And the Z9 feels exactly like that in the hand. The button placement and layout is very similar to all of the Nikon cameras you've used in the past. There's only a few minor tweaks and changes that come with the Z series and stuff like that. But you know, as soon as you pick it up, you'll know your way around it pretty much. The only thing that I've kind of been getting used to is, you know, the preview, review button is down here on the right hand side, what used to be up next to the viewfinder. And to be honest, that's basically because now that we've got an EVF and you can review the pictures in the EVF, you can actually do it without having to take your hand away. That is absolutely ideal if you're trying to like not move very much when your subject's in front of you. That's really, really good. Of course, with DSLRs, you'd have to take them down to look at the pictures on the screen. So it kind of makes sense that I've moved it down there. You can now move it and keep using it whilst your eyes to the viewfinder. That is something that we should really be very grateful for, and it's very useful out in the field. It's just going to take a little time to get my muscle memory into it. Other than that, everything is pretty much as where you would expect it to be on a professional Nikon DSLR. The feel is really good. And I'll talk about the feel because when I picked this camera up, I was smitten immediately. Not just because it's kind of this sexy new camera that has all these wonderful new features, but it's the feel in the hand. It feels really special, and the only camera that really feels like this, if you've ever picked one up, is the Nikon F6 that I luckily have one right here to show you. It's something to do with the grip depth on this, that it just fits like an absolute glove in your hand. It feels really solid, really well built, but it just fits your hand so perfectly. And I always wish that my D850, even like the D5 and stuff, felt like this. But the Z9, well, the Z9 feels like that. And I think that is high praise enough in terms of build quality and everything like that. There's only one thing that is kind of a minor gripe for me. I just wish that the microphone and headphone port was separate to the Ethernet one. You know, when I'm using them, I don't really want the Ethernet port open a lot of the time. And it'd be nice if they were just kind of single port covers on the side, but it's not really a big deal at all. Certainly not anything that I'm going to worry too much about, because actually the flap kind of goes halfway when you've got the mics in, but that would have been nice, and that's probably my only gripe with the whole design. You do have the flip screen that some people wouldn't be majorly happy with on a professional camera. They think it, you know, has some reduction in the kind of ruggedness, but to be honest, it feels really great. I've already used it a few times to get those low angle shots, and of course, because now the way that the focus works and everything like that in, well, you know, through a mirrorless camera, using the screen is so much easier to actually get photos sharp and everything, that I do find that I actually am using it. So it is really nice to have that. And the fact that it goes horizontal, kind of vertical as well for doing those, you know, portrait pictures, again, very, very useful and nice to see. All in all, I like it. The only other one thing that I would say is that trying to open this is kind of learning to be a little bit difficult. It's quite hard to do it whilst you're behind the camera because you have to get some like real like force to it, but I mean, I'll get used to it, I'm sure. Right, so moving on from actual design, let's get into, well, what should we start with? I suppose the one that everyone wants to know, autofocus. Let's get with that. So, kind of caveat to start with, the lenses that I've been using most of the time have been adapted via the FTZ adapter. I've only got the FTZ1 at the moment. I will get an FTZ2 at some point. But to be honest, I've been super impressed with the way that my native f-mount lenses have translated over to the Z9. To be honest, they seem to be faster than they ever were with my DSLRs. My 300 2.8 Bear is absolutely amazing. With the 1.4 teleconverter, it's still absolutely amazing. The lock on, everything like that, really, really good. And even with the 500 PF as well that I've been trialing with, you know, it seems snappy, fast, and just as quick, if not quicker, than with any f-mount camera like the D850. The autofocus itself, well, let's dive into that. So of course, with a new camera and using the mirrorless, we've got different modes to what we would have on a DSLR. Back in the day, most of the time I used single point autofocus, and that was really just how I had things set up. I'd always done it like that. I didn't really use many of the tracking modes. I only ever used a small group mode if I was doing birds in flight, and that was only if I was doing it quite a lot. Most of the time I'd still have it in single point. But with the Z9 and the capabilities with the IAF and everything like that, I'm switching it up a bit in the way that I'm shooting and learning to shoot with this camera. I certainly haven't mastered everything about it yet, but I'm just kind of setting it up in a way, and then I'll experiment from there over the next couple of months. So to start with, how I've got things set up at the moment is I have it on a small wide with auto animal eye detection. That's ready to go, and that's just on all the time, you know, using my AF on button to you know, initiate my autofocus and stuff like that. On the joystick here, what I've actually done is I've programmed that to be an AF on button plus switch it to 3D tracking, and I found that worked really, really well. The 3D tracking in this is superb. You know, what I find is I can get it over a subject using the wide area mode, get my focus there, and then that will also automatically detect eyes and focus on that when I'm pressing that. If I then press my joystick down and lock the 3D tracking on, I can move around the frame, move the camera about, everything like that, change my composition, and exactly where my subject is that I've pinpointed and tracking has been staying there, and it's been locked on really nicely. Birds in flight, that's worked really well. Animals on the ground, it's worked really well. I've been really impressed with the system, and it's certainly got me thinking to myself, now is the time to move away from single point, all in pretty much all situations other than very rare occurrences when you're trying to get something that's too small in terms of the autofocus group. But largely that tends to be when you're a bit too far away from the subject anyway, so I think that's going to be absolutely fine. I am certainly looking forward to just trying all the modes out, testing them regularly in the field and seeing what's really going to work. One thing I would like, I don't know if I can do yet, is program another button to be another type of autofocus with AF on. Let's see if I can do that, because then I'd be able to switch 3 different autofocus types with a touch of a button and initiate focus, rather than having to ever actually press the side button and change autofocus mode. That would be really, really handy, but having 2 at the moment has been great so far. In terms of IAF and tracking, I've been out shooting pictures over the last couple of weeks. I've been working with hares on the kind of local fields around here. I've been to my nature reserve looking for water voles. Didn't find too many, but I did have a really nice encounter with a muntjac, and then I've also managed to photograph some standard birds in flight, local gulls and stuff like that to test that. Now, in terms of working in the fields here, I've been crawling around with the lens in front of me, trying to get close to hares, and I was amazed by the way that it could pick up eyes, even on ground level hares. When they're laying like flat on the ground, you can just see them above the kind of line of the grass and stuff like that. The camera would find the eye and the little box would appear and focus on that. It wasn't getting, worried too much by any grass movement, anything like that. That was really, really great to see. I was really impressed by that, and it certainly is useful, especially when you're struggling on your front, trying to hold a heavy lens and crawl across the ground, lock focus, hold it in the right place. Having that eye detection and being able to quickly, click to 3D tracking, keep with it, is going to be super handy and a pretty game changer. I had a really nice encounter with a couple of hares actually on this field here. I was crawling across the back, and they were kind of getting ready, early mating season, and running around in front of me. And the Z9 was tracking, sticking the autofocus the whole time. Got a nice sequence of the hare running out in front of me, and then the 2 coming after each other, sniffing each other and stuff like that. And it just worked great. It really did a really good job, and I was super impressed. And that was like the 3rd or 4th day that I was out with the camera. So, without having too much experience, it's already doing very well. When I went to my local nature reserve looking for water voles, I found that's one of the only times when I wanted to switch over to single point focus. When it was very hard to pick them out through tiny little vegetation, that's when single point just meant I could kind of dial in and be a little bit closer, but that's absolutely fine. That's what I'd expect for that sort of shooting. But turning over, there was actually a muntjac deer appeared behind me, and just switching and having my autofocus ready with eye detection, I was immediately able to lock focus and just nail some shots. I think one thing that was so useful in that situation was the fact that I'm shooting completely silently now. With the electronic shutter in the camera, I have it turned off, so there's no noise whatsoever. You just see these blinking lines go on when you're taking pictures. And muntjac can be spooked so easily when the camera clicks, but because I'm making absolutely no noise, I got a good like 3, 4, 5 minutes with it. Just sat there looking at me, having a really great chance to turn the camera around, get some different angles, look at even doing a panoramic shot, stuff like that. Things that probably wouldn't have been possible with my D850 going bang, 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 bang. So again, really handy. The IAF locked on, you know, that's a kind of larger mammal test, found it really easy. And once I had it kind of pressed in, locked and held down my 3D tracking, it was keeping my subject in focus and getting it right. And really good quality. And in terms of the number that are in focus, and I was shooting at f2.8, I was really super happy with. Much higher keeper rate than I would expect with my D850. That is certainly nice to see when you've invested this much on a camera. The last kind of autofocus test I did was that of birds in flight. Whilst I was back in my local nature reserve, the rain was really heavy on one day, so I was in the hide. Luckily there was a few gulls kind of moving around and stuff like that, and it gave me a good chance to just quickly get some birds in flight autofocus. It worked really well picking them up, again using my wide area to start with, then initiating 3D tracking, picked up the eye, stayed with it, and across like 20 frames as you're holding your finger on the button, pretty much everyone is dead sharp. That is really amazing. I definitely know, you know, back in the day when I've been using the D850, having it on single point, that would have never been the case. I'd have never been able to get that many perfect because I'd have moved the autofocus point just a little bit, that mean it had been off, meaning that I'd have missed that. The fact that now the eye locks and tracks with it, it makes it so much kind of easier to get those shots and be consistent with your focus. That really is nice to see. And it just means you don't kind of like ping off into the background as many times. Once it locks on, bang, it's in, it's tracking it, and you're getting those shots. And with 20 frames a second, you're getting even more chance to make those pictures. Right, so that hopefully kind of covers autofocus in terms of my first impressions. Again, not conclusive. I still need to test every single mode individually and find the best times for it. But as I'm shooting at the moment with a wide area, with IAF for animals, and then the 3D tracking, I'm super stoked with the camera. And if it just came with that, I'd be more than happy. So let's move on now to that high frames a second. One of the questions I got was about shooting 14-bit RAW and how you know, the buffer depth is and everything like that. I've had basically no problems with the buffer depth. I've tried to just hold my finger down the whole time and get to the end of the buffer, and of course, yeah, after about 4 seconds, 5 seconds, it locks up and it's going to start to slow down a bit, but it's still shooting as long as you've got fast enough cards. But in terms of the way I shoot, that tends to be in kind of short bursts, like watching the action, getting 8, 9, 10 frames, and then, you know, lifting your finger a bit, putting it back down. If you shoot like that, and it's the way you should be shooting, because you shouldn't just be holding your finger down the whole time, you're going to find that you basically never hit the buffer. The moment you take the finger off the shutter button, lift that up, I just find that it's back to 25 again, it's ready to shoot. And in terms of real world shooting, the 20 frames a second is just absolutely mad. The number of extra pictures you get per encounter. You know, if you've got a couple of seconds with the subject, suddenly you've got 40 pictures instead of 1 or 2 that you might have got before. It's in focus, locking it, and then you've got that chance to get those extra frames. And the buffer is only going to really hit if you're just one of those people who like welds your finger to it, holds it down. For sports photographers, if you're doing that 100 meters and you really just need to get every single one, you'll probably just drop down to 12-bit and have basically unlimited anyway. But if you want the best quality out of the camera, as I do, I still think that the buffer performance in terms of its, you know, the way it just refreshes it and can shoot another 40, 50, 60 frames like moments later is more than enough than I could ever anticipate needing. So that's absolutely great. I don't think you'll have any problems there at all. So that's kind of buffer and things like that. One thing I would say though is you want to get some really good cards. I'm using the Manfrotto CF Expresses, and these are, I'm pretty sure, made by Delkin, but I need to look into the absolute best cards, but I've had no problems with these at all. The speed seems to be brilliant. I think they run at like 1700 meg, something like that, and that is just so blazing fast for shooting out in the field. That's been great, so no problems there. What else is there really? I mean, just in terms of performance and usage every day, it's a joy to use. It really makes me feel happy to be behind the camera. The viewfinder is really nice. I much prefer the round viewfinder, and this rubber that they've got on it is much more comfortable with my glasses for a start. And also, I just think it's not going to be as easy to kind of tear as it was on my Z6. That was a problem I had there. It's much more rugged. Also, you know, the relief from this at the back is really nice, comfortable when you've got your face pressed up against the camera for hours at a time. And I definitely think that the detection on the back between screen and viewfinder has improved too, because it seems to kind of not lock me out at any point when I'm looking between the two. That is really nice as well. I'm just really impressed so far, to be honest. I know that I'm trying to find negatives with it. I mean, for some people, it's, you know, heavy for sure. It is a big lump of a camera, but as a wildlife photographer, I'm pretty used to that. I suppose really the only negative is the price, and £5,000 and a bit is a lot. It is a lot of money to spend on a camera, but with this being my day job, it's just an investment for me. And in reality, the specs that are included in this camera, I think Nikon could have charged quite a lot more and it still would have been an absolute steal. I'm hoping that this camera is going to be my kind of flagship camera that's going to be in my hand for the next good 4-5 years, and it's going to help me make loads of pictures out on location. So the investment will certainly, hopefully, pay off. But right now, 2 weeks in, having been using the camera almost daily to get out and shoot local wildlife, I'm super impressed, and I cannot wait to push this a little bit harder on some bigger trips and go find some great moments with wildlife. Now, I'm pretty sure I will have missed something in this kind of little chat about the Z9. So if you have any questions about it, anything that you're like, Tom, you missed that, why don't you talk about that? Drop it in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to talk about it, have big discussions about it, anything like that. And if there's some big questions that people keep asking, I'll do kind of follow-up videos and talk about those things as well. I will do more videos, of course, on the Z9 on how I'm setting it up, an actual menu walkthrough at some point, and then just more in the field location stuff to show you guys how it's shooting. I will attach my Atomos at some point and kind of video through the camera to show you my kind of shooting out in the field. But one thing I do know is that when you've got the Atomos attached, it does slow down the performance a little bit. And to be honest, when you paid $5 and a bit grand for a camera, you want to get the absolute best out of it. And dragging an Atomos around as I'm crawling across the fields isn't the most practical solution. And of course, it's one of the reasons I actually wanted the Z9 to give me that raw video, that 10-bit video, all in one camera, so I didn't have to have all the additions. But I will do it for you guys if you want to see it. But right, until the next one, guys, I'm going to be out here shooting and enjoying my Z9. As I said, if you've got any questions, drop them down below. But yeah, until the next one, get out there, get shooting, enjoy your wildlife photography, and I'll see you soon. And I should probably drink my coffee now. See ya.